I'm actually a philosopher rather than a scientist, so this is going to be a philosophy talk. Apologies for that. Like, lower the expectation. All right, so yeah, I'm Niccolò Negro from Tel Aviv University, Liad Mudrik lab. And in the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to talk a bit about consciousness. Okay, by consciousness, I mean experience, right? I mean this intrinsic perspective that we have on the world and on ourselves. I know for sure that I am conscious. I suspect you are all conscious right now. And as we saw, we treat perhaps our pets as conscious entities, like with some feelings, emotions, thoughts, perceptions. But there are many other creatures around us for which this question, whether they are conscious or not, whether they feel anything at all, becomes a bit problematic. And yet, these creatures really matter for many practical and ethical debates. Think of unresponsive patients, think of fetuses, animals, maybe robots, or the self-driving cars that we saw earlier, right? These creatures matter, and yet we don't really know whether they feel anything. So what we need, perhaps, is some sort of consciousness detector, something that you point at the entity, and it will tell you whether there is consciousness there, whether there is experience or not. And how do we do that? How can we determine whether an entity is conscious? So I guess the standard approach, which I like, is to say, well, let's do some science. Let's look at the neuroscience of it and try to learn something from there. That's why even if I am a philosopher by training, I am collaborating with neuroscientists and psychologists who develop and test theories of consciousness. There is, I think, a problem, though, with the approach that says, let's just do the science. I believe it is necessary but not sufficient. And just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about, this is how consciousness was defined just 30 or so years ago. It says consciousness is a fascinating but elusive phenomenon. It is impossible to specify what it is, what it does, or why it evolved. Nothing worth reading has been written on it. Okay, so complete waste of time. Don't tell the Azrieli Foundation. But nowadays, right, 30 years or so after that, we can write a paper in Nature Neuroscience on theories of consciousness, right? So a lot has happened. And the idea is that if 30 years ago was a waste of time, it means that the field is still pretty young, right? So there are a lot of theories, a lot of ideas, and it's a bit, like a 3-year-old kid, like full of energy, but a bit messy, perhaps. And that's why I believe that there is some serious philosophical work to be done here. And just to give you an example of how different and complex the field is, I will show you the 4 most prominent, most influential theories that we have in the neuroscience of consciousness nowadays. So look at, for example, integrated information theory, the first one, IIT. It tells you that consciousness is a causal structure, the structure of any physical system. It doesn't have to be the brain, as long as this system is able to causally constrain its own past and future over and beyond the causal contribution of its parts, then the system is conscious. Then you have recurrent processing theory, RPT, that tells you not consciousness is actually a biological phenomenon that occurs here in the back of the brain when information is processed through recurrent feedback loops. Okay? And then you have higher order theory that tells you not consciousness is a functional, is a cognitive phenomenon. The information here in the back, in the sensory areas of the brain, is not sufficient. You need a metacognitive pointer that speaks about that information. Only then will it become conscious. And then you have the global workspace theory that agrees with the higher order theory and says that the prefrontal cortex is actually necessary for consciousness, but not because it really represents information, sensory information, but because the information in the sensory area needs to be ignited into this workspace that happens to be realized in the prefrontal cortex, so just becoming famous in the brain. So that's these are the 4 theories, and you can see how different they are, and that's why I believe that we need to do some conceptual and philosophical work on trying to determine which one is best. And this is my angle, coming from the philosophy of science. This is what I'm trying to do, and specifically, I'm trying to adopt some methods and ideas from this fellow here, philosopher Imre Lakatos. And I believe that this can help neuroscientists with theory testing, theory comparison, and ultimately theory assessment. The way we are doing it is by representing these 4 theories that we just saw, according to this center-periphery model. No need to squint and try to look inside the box. This is a draft that we did for G&W, but what matters is the structure, is the idea, the general idea. At the core, you really have the central idea of a research program, of a theory, something that the scientist does really believe in and doesn't want to give up on, okay? And then around this core idea, you can represent the various statements, claims, auxiliary hypotheses, and auxiliary assumptions that help the theory, but they are not central to it. And the idea is that the more assumptions you need to generate an empirical prediction, the more peripheral that prediction will be, and less important, less relevant for the entire program will be. And this, I think, this visualization helps empirical work, right? Because if you are an experimentalist, you want to, I don't know, test the theory, you're trying to falsify the theory, you're not going to allocate your limited resources to try to test a peripheral prediction over there, right? Because that even if that's wrong, the scientist will just modify an assumption or something, and the theory will be okay. So what you want to do is to try to damage something that is close to the core of the theory. And I believe that visualizing theory in this way helps. And then another thing that you can do is to try to spot so-called hub effects. This is true for any network, right? For any network science. If you want to damage the integrity of the network, try to falsify a claim that really carries a lot of information, centers of information. And then you can zoom in on more specific predictions. If you are interested in a specific state of affairs, for example, you can individuate areas of empirical overlap. For example, IIT will tell you that if you are interested in stimulus decoding, you want to extract information about the stimulus, you need to look in the back of the brain. G&W will tell you that you have to look in prefrontal areas. So again, you can test and compare theories on specific state of affairs and see which theory gets things right. So how does this help with the question we started from? How to determine which creature is conscious and which is not? I believe that this gives us a protocol. It gives us some systematic way to analyze theory and compare theories. So I believe that this starts with understanding a theory, then representing it, comparing, testing it, and once the empirical evidence come in, then we can finally assess them. And if we end up with a good theory of consciousness, we can take advantage of its implications for deciding whether an entity is conscious. Right? Problem is that, as we said, these 4 theories that we have, these are not the only theories that we have in the field, but these are the most prominent. As we saw, they are quite different. That means that depending on which theory you input in your consciousness detector, the outcome will be different, and quite different. How different? This is just a quick and perhaps inaccurate overview, but gives you a sense of what we are talking about here. So if, look at IIT, for example. If IIT turns out to be right, perhaps plants are conscious, perhaps our shoes are conscious. We might need to talk about that, right? That's a bit counterintuitive. And compare that with a higher order theory, for example. You see how much stricter it is, and perhaps newborn babies, maybe they're not conscious. So perhaps we can punch them and they don't feel anything. So the message is this, and the final message is this, that the picture that this of the world of consciousness and the world that these theories are portraying is very different. And since consciousness is such an important aspect of our lives, some people say it is the most important aspect. It is really crucial for the many ethical debates that we saw earlier. It is really important to get things right. And this is why I'm collaborating with scientists doing this job and try to help towards this question. Okay, thank you very much.